Hi, I'm Maria Theoharis Silvello on social media. Welcome back to Server 50 podcast on Organised Style. Grab a cuppa and relax with us.
I'm not the average sewer. I'm the average everything else, but I'm not the average sewer. And for me, it's really nice to have such a broad mix of different people. Sewing is for everyone.
That's Mitch Bridgewater. Mitch was on Series 8 of the Great British Sewing Bee. I'm really thankful that Mitch has agreed to be on the podcast today for Server 50. A big shout out to the podcast's Patreon supporters. I'd love it if you could join them in supporting this podcast each month so that I can continue to provide it to you for free. Let's listen to Mitch now.
Hello?
Hello.
I can hear you now. Success.
Honestly, Zoom just throws me some days.
Oh, technology, who'd have it?
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you, I actually watched your episode yesterday.
Oh, did you?
I did. When you were selected to be on the Great British Sewing Bee, we'll only touch on this for a short while because we want to know about you. What was the process like to get there?
Going on the sewing bee is quite difficult to get onto the sewing bee, and I'm sure you've heard from other sewing bees about the process that you go through. My year was quite different to a lot of the other years because we were the only, and touch wood, I hope we're the only year that ever has to do the process during COVID-19.
I agree with you.
So an awful lot of what we did was over distance. For us, there were 4 rounds of audition to get on the show. First was a written round, which actually I was never going to apply to go on the sewing bee. I took up sewing during the first lockdown. I taught my wife how to bake and make cheese, and she taught me how to knit and how to sew. Sewing is the one that really stuck. And she said, "Oh, actually, you're quite good at this."
Well, that's good.
I said, "Well, thank you very much." She said, "You should go on the Great British Sewing Bee." And I said, "No, I've only been sewing for 3 months." I came home from work one day and she'd started filling in the application form. So that's how my journey got started. She filled it in and I said, "Right, okay, I'll apply." And I thought that would be the end of it. Then you get the phone call from the BBC. "Mitch, we really liked your application. We'd like to hear more from you. Could you send us some of your makes?" I sent pictures down and I sent a couple of small garments that I'd made. I'd recently made a little dress for a friend's little girl. So I sent all that down to their head office in London.
Well, that's good.
It all came back and I thought, "Oh, well, that's lovely. I'm flattered that my application's been well received."
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, you get another phone call. "These are great. We'd like to invite you to the 3rd round of audition. And this is where we'll see if you can sew whilst being recorded." Now, in other years, you get invited down to a TV studio to do this with lots of other potential bees. But for my year, because of COVID, we were actually sent a camera to our home and told, "You need to find somewhere quiet that you can set up a little sewing area where we can see you iron and sew and cut out." Well, I've got 2 small children, a dog and a cat, so finding a quiet area at home was quite a challenge. So I actually sent all of my family off to my mum to go and stay for a night
Good on your mum for helping you out.
and set all up. And then a big brown envelope came and we were told we weren't allowed to open it until we were on camera.
Right.
We got called into a Zoom meeting, and in that Zoom meeting, there was a producer, the BBC's sewing expert, and then in my group, there were 8 other potential bees. And they did numerous sessions of these. I think the year I went on, there were over 8,000 applicants.
Wow.
So they had a lot. We opened the brown envelope on screen, and that was the first time we saw what we were going to make on camera. We'd been told beforehand that we'd need 1.5 meters of fabric and that we'd need a zip. That was all we were told. So I'd done a little bit of guessing what we'd be making. And luckily for me, it turned out it was a little girl's dress.
Excellent.
I'd already practiced making a little girl's dress recently. So you do it like a dry run that you would see on the Great British Sewing Bee on the TV. You have to talk with the producer about what you're doing. They want to hear about any mistakes and things as you go along. And I think we had 2.5 hours on the call, which isn't very long. So that's sort of to put you under pressure to see how you would do under the time constraints of the Great British Sewing Bee. And I was the only one in our group that actually finished the dress.
Great work.
We put it back in the brown envelope at the end of the recording, sent it off, went to their sewing expert to be checked. So they made you seal it on camera so that you couldn't fix it afterwards. And then the final round, you got called again, and that was the first time we actually saw anybody in person. They did a meeting in London and they did a meeting in Manchester. I got called to the meeting in Manchester, took a couple of garments with me, and that was the chief producer of the show. Somebody who's been producing the show since series 1. And if you're a fan of the Sewing Bee, that's like meeting royalty.
Oh, yeah.
I was quite anxious about it, but it was really just to chat with you and see what you were like as a person. I think some people forget with the Great British Sewing Bee that it's a person-centered entertainment program first and a sewing program second. It very much follows the stories of the lives of the people that go on it. And one thing I think that's lovely about it is it appeals to young people that have never even looked at a sewing machine, all the way to time-served sewists that have a lot of experience. When I first started sewing, the only person I knew that could do it was my mum and my wife.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I'd got a whole community of such a wide range of backgrounds and ages that you just met for the first time and you all bonded over talking about sewing. So they got to see how we interacted with different people from different backgrounds and how we could talk to a camera and to a presenter. And then you went home, think, oh, you've had a lovely day out. You've got to meet some fantastic people. Maybe I've got to meet somebody who's going to be on the Sewing Bee. It was within 3 days after that, you got the phone call, Mitch, we'd like you to be one of our 12.
Wow.
And the rest, as they say, is history. I said, are you sure? And they said, no, we've really enjoyed everything that you've done. We think you'd be a great fit for the show. We'll send you some details. And that's it. You're one of the 12. So even though when I was on the show, I did go out in the first episode, so I finished 12th, I actually finished 12th out of over 8,000, not 12 out of 12. So it was, for maybe a couple of months of my life, a full-time job. What a fantastic, fun thing to do.
From what we see on TV, we only see the 12. We don't know about the 8,000 that you, in inverted commas, competed against, which you wouldn't have known.
No, absolutely not. I think it's very easy when you're watching the show, and I'm guilty of it myself. Tuesday night, the first episode of the new series was shown here in the UK, and it's very quickly to forget how much extra stuff has gone on beforehand and during, because when you're filming, I do quite a lot of talks about my time on the Sewing Bee, and people go, yeah, but do you really only get that amount of time? And the truth is you do. If they say you've got 3.5 hours, you have got 3.5 hours. But in that 3.5 hours, you've got at least 20 minutes talking to Patrick and Esme, the presenters, or talking to the comedian who's presenting the whole show, or you've got cameras coming and recording your feet or your hands.
Yeah.
We would start the day at 5 a.m. and we wouldn't finish until maybe 9, 10 o'clock at night.
That's a lot of hours.
Even though you were doing a 3-hour challenge, all the preparation work to get ready to film, all of the bit after where you see everybody get their feedback, and you maybe see 20 seconds, 30 seconds per contestant.
Yep.
In reality, you've got about half an hour, 45 minutes of critique, which is fantastic. If you're new to sewing and you've got these two experts giving you constructive feedback, it's brilliant. But then on the show, you only see that short 30 seconds. And believe me, if you have a bad test, like my second one was, that went really badly, you've got half an hour of being told how rubbish it is. Oh. So it's quite a long experience. But it's all part of what you sign up for. And actually, it's why when you watch the show, you think, well, these people have only known each other for an hour. They've not. It's why you see on the Sewing Bee, people work together so well. If there's a drama, somebody's already ready to chip in and help. And I just don't think you get to see that in a lot of other competition shows. in many other hobbies, it feels like the sewing community is very supportive and there's always somebody there with more knowledge who can offer help if you ask for it. And I think that's one of the magic things about the sewing community.
That's right. And it's quite lovely to see that when they're saying 10 minutes to go or half an hour to go, and someone's machine or the needle or the thread, and you just feel for the person, then someone will help as well. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody helps. Some people think that there's a team of specialists not on camera that rush in to help, and they don't. If a needle breaks, you've got to fix it yourselves. But because the relationship is so close between the sewers on the show, everybody's ready to help. And that's something that you don't always get to see in the final cut product that gets shown on the television, is how much time you spend going between different people's sewing areas and helping them with different things. And I know my final challenge, I wouldn't have got finished if it wasn't for Deborah, one of the other contestants, coming across and helping me just get the final fitting right. It's one of those things that I was on the show for that episode, just the one episode, but those people that I've been on the show with, I speak to every day now, and they're friends for life. And the Sewing Bees from series 1 all the way up to the new series have a chat group together. So that friendship circle is right from the very first series of the Sewing Bee to we've just invited the new Sewing Bees in. So it's really nice to have that support.
And Matthew was the one, he sews Matthew. I'd had him on the podcast, a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that as well. So he doesn't feel isolated. He feels like he's amongst a really good group of friends now.
Completely. Matthew is so wonderful, and his style is so individual. But you could say that about so many of the Sewing Bees. Part of the thing of getting chosen to go on these shows you are a little bit different because that's what people want to see, because it's entertaining. But there's people in that group that in normal everyday life, I would never have the opportunity of socializing with. Never. I never have the opportunity of learning from and teaching. But now, because this group of oddballs have all been thrust together, we're incredibly close. And I know that I, as a lower middle class, straight white man, I'm not the average sewer. I'm the average everything else, but I'm not the average sewer. And for me, it's really nice to have such a broad mix of different people within that community. I say this to everybody I speak to. Sewing is for everyone. Since being on the Sewing Bee, I've done an awful lot of work about doing cross-generation teaching with some of these skills like sewing, that if we don't pass on to younger people coming through, we'll lose them. And I think it's so important that you have that real mesh of different people from different backgrounds, of different ages, all working together. I just think it's so important and such a lovely thing. And I think sewing does it better than anything else currently.
Last week at the start of Series 10 on Instagram, you put a supportive message to the current lot of bees about social media. Can you tell us what that was all about?
Going one step further to this idea of us all supporting each other, first and foremost, we're all fans of the show. That's why we applied to go on. And social media can be a fantastic tool for those that have been on the show. It's a great way to show your work and to share different things with people all over the world. I'm talking to you from the opposite side of the world.
Yeah.
It unites us all in that way. But it can also be really challenging because when you're on the show, because people don't see all of the hard work that you put in, I don't think they appreciate what that person who goes out first has had to go through, and the pressure and the work. And you could be the best sewer in the world and go out first on the Sewing Bee, because the show isn't necessarily about how good a sewer you are.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a wide set of skills and be able to do things quickly. I am very much a slow sewer, naturally. I like to do a bit and go and have a cup of tea, go and walk the dog, have a chat, watch an episode of something on TV, and then go back and sew. So to go on the show and do it in the way that it's filmed and the intense nature, I think people forget that. So for me, I wanted to put a message out to the newbies, just saying, hey, look, we love the show. I think you're all amazing people for going on it.
Yeah.
And just enjoy it. And my message at the end of that post I put on social media was enjoy this time, take the positive, and keep doing your thing. That is the most important thing. One thing that is telling about the Great British Sewing Bee is that everybody I've spoken to from every series that's ever been on still sews, still loves the show. And I think it could very easily alienate you between social media and sewing under pressure. That I want to just remind people, when that initial wave of fame, that small amount of fame that you get at the very beginning, good will come with bad, but the good lasts a lot longer than the bad does. That was about that. And I'm in the very exclusive club of people that were knocked out first. And it's hard because I watch my episode back. I've only done it once. And I'm proud I applied. I'm proud of the things that I tried to do. But also, I know that what I made on there is not how I usually sew. And I know that I make things that I wear all the time that are much better put together. I make things for my wife that are much better put together. So it's just reminding them and reminding everybody that what you do on the show doesn't necessarily mean you're a really good sewer, really bad sewer. Just enjoy it for what it is, and that is entertainment. And I think if you look at the show, every year the viewing figures go up and up and up around the world. It's sold to more and more countries. And one of our big chain shops of crafting over here did some research a couple of years ago, and it was on the sale of new sewing machines. And they asked, what's inspired you to take up sewing? And the Sewing Bee was mentioned. And I just think that's fantastic. Again, it goes back to when I look online and I look at some of the discussion forums, a lot of people say, oh, we'd like to see a lot more technical skills and we'd like to see more teaching on there. And I completely understand that. And I think that there's definitely a place for that. And there should be more programs about sewing and crafting. But I think the Sewing Bee is that gateway drug to a life of sewing, because sewing's not a hobby. Sewing's who you are. I always tell people I'm a fabric collector first, and then I sew after that. And it's very much a lifestyle. I can't go anywhere without looking at something somebody's wearing and thinking, oh, that's magic. It's definitely a life. And you look at the forums, and the Sewing Bee really does get people that have been out of sewing for a while. It makes them feel joy about trying again and getting back into it.
We hear that on the podcast often.
And it also brings new people into it. And I think that is so important, because you need both of those people with lived experience and people with no experience. That's how the community grows and gets better and richer.
That's right. I'm a long-time sewer. So when I meet someone new and they're making something, I actually have to sit there going, hang on a second, what's their experience? So don't judge it.
Yeah.
Just accept that they've got a different point of view and this is what they've done. And that's great. And so it's always, you've done a great job. And they have.
Absolutely. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that's learning.
Yep.
You can't learn unless you get it wrong. I should learn an awful lot by the amount I get wrong. And even this week, the new series, and I won't give any spoilers to any of the listeners.
No, don't.
But one of them has done something with making their own fabric that I've never done and I've never seen done before. I know it must happen, but I've never seen it done. They injected so much of their personality into making their fabric. It's made me want to go and try it. If something on anything makes you want to go and have a go, that's brilliant.
So I'm guessing that you wouldn't have done anything differently from your time on the Bee.
If I was to go on the Sewing Bee again, I don't think there is a way you can prepare better for it.
Yep.
I tried sewing lots of different garments, and I really gave a go to some things that I've never made before. And I think that's important, especially if you're going on the Sewing Bee as somebody who's fairly new to the art. But one thing I would do is I would try and focus more on enjoying my time with the other people than focusing on the anxiety of, oh, I've got an hour to sew this garment, because it's such a fabulous experience. And actually, the things that I took away from the show were the friendship and were the new community that I've entered, but advice from the judges like Patrick and Esme.
Yeah.
You would pay thousands and thousands to get that in any other walk of life. And I got that by being on the show. And I'm really grateful for that. So I would ask more questions if I was on again. I think that is the only thing I would do differently, is I would ask Patrick and Esme more questions, because it's all about learning. Every day is a school day, and they're two brilliant, experienced people from the industry, especially Esme, who has made for multi-million-dollar films and celebrities, and has partied with David Bowie and has lived such a life. Those are the people you really want to learn from. If you've never done anything with media before, it's such a strange world to go into TV. When you see on camera the 12 sewers, the 2 judges and the presenter, you think, oh, there's a cameraman in there, obviously, and there's someone doing the sound. No, there's about 8 cameramen. There's a director. There's a dozen people doing sound. How they managed to film that show without getting the crew on camera, I'll never know, because I've never seen so many people in such a small room. Oh my, was it warm? Because you've got sound equipment. They can't have big fans or anything.
No.
So you've got these, they were maybe the size of an orange, big navel orange, fans underneath the desk. So you had nice, cool ankles, but nothing else. And you've got all these people. If you've never done TV before, it's alien. I remember I was sewing the second make on my episode. I'm terrible for putting pins in my mouth. If I'm sewing, I'll have a pin hanging out my mouth, and then I got asked to refilm me sewing something because I'd got a pin in my mouth, and we can't show that on TV. It's really bad. Yeah, I know, but I've already sewed it now. I've already sewed it now. You know, just pretend. Just pretend. Okay. So it's very, very strange. And obviously, when you're sewing, you'll know you get in a bit of a groove, a bit of a flow. It completely takes you out of it when somebody comes and says, we actually need you to do that again, or your foot's not in the right place on the pedal for us to get a shot of your feet. And you just think, wow, this is surreal. So for those new people coming on, if they've got no experience of TV and they like to work in a similar way that I do, with tea breaks and going for a walk, they're in for a big shock.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, but it is a brilliant experience. Some people ask me, would you go on it again? And absolutely, at the drop of a hat, in a heartbeat, I would go on it again, because it's such a fantastic experience. And now, with us just starting series 10, there's only just over 100 of us. It feels like it would be nice for the producers of the show to do a redemption challenge with some of us who went on and didn't do so well. I'm trying to push them into doing it.
The first episode, people.
Yeah, absolutely. A redemption challenge. And we've long talked about them doing an all-stars with some of the winners as well. People like to see, when they watch the show, they like to see people make really beautiful things. Of course they do. But those that are invested into the whole project, the whole 10 weeks or whatever it is, I think it's really nice to see people's journeys, how they get better. Some people that have been rubbish in the first week and get stronger and stronger and stronger as time goes on. There was a guy who was on the year before me, I think, Damien. He was rubbish. In episode 1, and this is fine to share, I've said the same thing to him. In episode 1, he was rubbish, but every week he got better. And by the end, he was making some of my favourite garments. And that is partially because you start to settle into the groove of the program and making it, and you get used to the cameraman. But also, it's like I was saying before, learning from other people in that group. If you're able to take that information quickly and start to use it, you can really change how competent you are as a sewer throughout the course of a series easily.
I mean, that makes sense. And it is comforting to know.
And even for one episode, I was definitely a better sewer when I left than when I started. And that's just one episode.
Yeah. pretty intense learning.
Baptism of fire, I think, is the way to describe it. It is intense, but who else can say they got to take a couple of months out of their life to just focus on doing sewing? I'm very lucky in that respect, and lucky I got a supportive family that wanted me to go and do it. My job allowed me to go and do it at the time. You are lucky to get the opportunity to go, and my year, over 8,000 people applied. You are very fortunate to get on the show, and part of it is your personality. Some of the sewing bees that made things that would fit themselves, after the show has taken them home and fixed them, and they now wear some of the things that they made on the show. When you're first getting started with sewing, repurposing, they're all really inexpensive ways of, number one, reducing our waste. We know how wasteful fashion and textiles can be. And it's an inexpensive way of getting started. You don't have to go and buy £80 a metre tweed. You can do it with a very, very inexpensive duvet cover or blanket and make something actually you'd really love. And not only would you love it, it would inspire you to have the confidence to do other things. Making your own clothes is categorically not cheaper than going and buying them. But it is a lot better because if you've made it, you know how to fix it, so it will last a lot longer. And two, you get to decide the quality of the material. There's less pressure on you if you make a mistake on an old duvet than if you make a mistake on the world's finest tweeds or silks, you know?
The loss of what you've done is a whole lot less. It's not a huge outlay. You're reusing, repurposing what was probably going to go to landfill anyway.
There are opportunities out there to pick up some dead cheap material secondhand. Car boot sales and secondhand shops are everywhere, and it's more important than ever to try and be a little bit mindful with what you use if you can.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask you about Linton Tweed because you're a Cumbrian local.
Oh, I love Linton Tweed. I've known about Linton Tweeds for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And my wife said, don't tell people why you know about Linton Tweeds. I knew about Linton Tweeds before I was into sewing ever, because they've got a cafe on site.
Yes, they do.
That does the best cakes in the city. So I knew Linton Tweeds as the cake place, not as the... not as the couture fashion house supplying fabric maker. I knew it as the place that, I could go and have a nice jacket potato and I could have a lovely egg custard cake. So I've known about it for years, but mainly as a cafe. But since going on the show, what's brilliant is I play soccer twice a week, and one of the lads I play with works in the factory.
Oh, wow.
So I've been for a tour and I've got to see all the machines, and I'm desperately trying to convince him to get some mates rates so that I can have some Linton Tweed sent to me relatively cheaply. But alas, it's not come to fruition yet. Oh, it's a fabulous place. And it's amazing how much of it, all the design and everything at Linton Tweed, is still done by hand.
I know.
Just magic. You can see why they supply some of the best fashion houses in the world. I love a French style jacket in Linton Tweed. I don't think there's anything better.
Mitch, before we finish up, for other men who want to learn how to sew, what advice would you give them?
If you're a man that wants to sew for the first time, don't be put off by being a man that wants to sew for the first time. I think it's important to remember that sewing is, to really simplify it and break it right down to its basics, a big, soft jigsaw. And anybody can make a big, soft jigsaw. It just takes time and patience. If you want to sew for the first time, don't expect the first thing you make to necessarily be wearable, but use it to learn how to use the tools. Then your second one will be something that you can go out in. Always start by using a simple pattern. Use a big supplier. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Find something that you love and you would really love, and make that pattern 2 or 3 times before you try anything else. That way, one, you'll know if you really, really enjoy doing it, because each time you'll enjoy it a little bit more. 2, if you're making the same thing, The practice will mean that by the end of that journey, you've got something you can wear. And 3, you're starting with the core basic principles. You're making something from a pattern that is simple, that you can wear. In terms of making clothes, that's the only way to start. If you start with something too complicated, you're going to end up disappointing yourself and stopping yourself from making more. Make something simple, make it lots of times. And please go and buy old duvet sets or pillowcases or blankets, anything that you don't mind sacrificing to make with. My children are just at the age where they're starting to sew with me. They like seeing the things that I've made. They went and picked a duvet set that was for their local football team that they really like, and it was inexpensive to buy. I made it and it was very personal to them because it was what they wanted. And they got the joy of picking something that they really wanted to wear. And I think that is important, whatever age you are. Make something for yourself first before you make it for anybody else, because then there's no pressure, and just enjoy it.
I'm really glad that you've been able to move your children onto sewing in a way that keeps them motivated to still sew with you and do something that they enjoy.
It's brilliant. I mean, with school and life, your creativity very quickly dwindles. I mean, my youngest, he's just turned 6. He's not old enough really to sit and sew a full garment on his own. Even from sort of 3-4 years of age, he used to come and sit by me when I was sewing, and he would press the pedal.
Aww.
And I'd just say, start and stop. It can be quite annoying when you're trying to make something relatively quickly, but it grows their interest.
Yeah.
When my wife applied for me to go on to the sewing bee, the big reason I said yes was for those boys, because I thought, if I can show my 2 children that you can put yourself out there and have a go at something you love, then maybe they'd do the same thing. For them, it was important for them to see their dad do that. The fact that now they're interested in sewing and it's something we can further bond over is just the cherry on top of the cake.
Mitch, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast for Sober 50. I'm really hoping that the new people who are looking to be future bees take on the advice you've given us today, because it's been absolutely gold for them and for me too. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a lovely day today, and thank you for inviting me into your sewing room.
Thank you so much for visiting my sewing room.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. This episode of Sober 50 Podcast on Organised Style was produced by me, Maria Thea Harris, with permission of Mitch, sound by bensound.com. Again, many thanks to the ongoing support of the podcast patrons and contributors. Their ongoing support enables me to develop this podcast for you for free. I hope you'll join them. You can subscribe to Soul Organised Style Podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sober 50 Podcast archive on Soul Organised Style Podcast. We look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.